Hello class and welcome back. Today we'll be delving into a different region of the world than where we have been thus far. We'll finally be moving over into Asia, the eastern part of the known world. Please title your notes for today Confucianism and Imperial China. So you'll find that the second half of the first unit is going to be delving more into Asian civilizations and philosophies, namely in today's class being Confucianism. So just to begin, two different critical thinking questions coming your way. Please pause the video here if needed and answer these questions in your notes. Number one, what is isolationism? And number two, do you think that isolationism is ever a good policy for a country? So, isolationism deals with a country that is distancing itself or locking its borders from foreign powers. Countries have done this many times over history for a lot of different reasons. It might be linked to xenophobia, or racism, or ethnocentrism. It might be linked to need or fear of military conquest. In the case of China, you'll see that it has resorted to isolationism for a lot of different reasons, most namely being an ethnocentric policy toward European countries. In terms of do you think isolationism is ever a good policy, you'll see that in some cases it's a necessity for countries to survive. However, it almost always comes at a cost. Being forced to rely on your own resources and your own land oftentimes depletes countries of what they need to survive. Likewise, not being able to trade with foreign powers tends to keep economies very small. China is in a very unique position, being such a large country and so distanced from Western Europe, but you'll see that it's going to face a very similar circumstance as time goes on in our course. Key to understanding the background of China is understanding what's called the Dynastic Cycle. You may have learned about this a little bit previously when talking about ancient civilizations in middle school, but basically the dynasty revolves around an emperor and their family ruling over China. The idea is that the emperor has what's called the mandate of heaven, meaning that they have this divine right or holy right to rule. You'll see this replicated in Europe during the Age of Absolutism. In this case, some dynasties spanned hundreds and hundreds of years with a single ruling family in power. When life started becoming worse for common people, and this could be caused by virtually anything, it could be caused by a natural disaster, a flood, an invasion, government corruption, crop failure. It was seen as a sign to the common people that the current ruling family had lost the mandate of heaven. They no longer had this divine or holy right to rule over the nation, and they should be replaced. This is typically when a new family would overthrow the current one and become the new dynasty. Again, this could happen many different ways. You'll see that it's often through military conquest. Just to show you, this is a chart highlighting the different dynasties of China, spanning all the way back to 1766 BCE, and lasting all the way until 1911 during the age of imperialism. We'll talk about that in our course right before World War I, as capitalism tried to thrive in China, clashing up with traditional beliefs and ultimately resulting in foreign powers moving in and carving up China into spheres of European and American influence. Again, just to show you this on a graph, this would be the dynastic cycle. One family claims the mandate of heaven, they restore peace, they appoint their officials, reshape the government, do positive things like building canals and irrigation systems. Several generations passed. The dynasty starts to decline in age, things start to go wrong, corruption takes place, taxes become higher, the people become unhappy, and then ultimately the dynasty is overthrown and replaced. So we're going to transition into a really important figure needed to understand China, and that is the philosopher Confucius. So Confucianism is the most notable philosophy in China in ancient times, but it really still touches Chinese civilization today. It's important to understand that China is largely a secular nation, meaning that there really is no reigning religion. Rather, it's more based on this philosophy. So Confucianism predicates itself on social mobility and the ability of people to move up in the world through things like hard work, discipline, and honor. It's a reward-based system. If you live a virtuous life and you listen to your government and you listen to authority figures and you listen to your parents, you will earn honor for yourself and therefore you will be rewarded. Another key part of understanding Confucianism is this very important example in what's called civil service exams. Lasting from 1605 to 1905, these were basically large-scale tests that would be taken over the course of several hours. It was only open to young boys, but the important thing to note is it didn't matter what your social status was, everyone was eligible to take this exam. Boys would spend years and years of their lives preparing for it. Their parents would pay for tutors to prepare them for it. And then ultimately, if they passed the test, they would automatically earn a government position. An enormous amount of stress, probably the first instance of high-stakes testing. It is important to note, though, that only wealthy families could afford preparation and books and tutors really needed to pass this rigorous test. So in a way, it was still designed to maintain the status quo, keep the wealthy wealthy and the poor poor. So just some other information regarding Confucianism. Life revolved around rituals and stability. Because everything was supposed to be made clear to the public, and you were supposed to follow through in this designed organization of society, the idea of Confucianism is that laws were not needed. Everyone would have a chance to move up in the world, therefore there was no need for crime or stealing or lawlessness. Simply by working hard, you could move up. Also, humaneness and kindness. Confucianism also promotes charity, charitable works, and living a virtuous life. And most importantly, it's honor for family, country, and authority figures. Confucianism is predicated on several relationships and respect that is expected of the participants. So for instance, a child should respect his father, subjects should respect their ruler, a wife should respect her husband, younger people should respect older people, and finally friends should respect one another. This is going to be very commonplace in Chinese society. You'll see this ideology a lot in meetings between different political figures over time. But this is really going to be how Chinese society functions for much of our course. So if you would, please take a look at the background reading in the syllabus. It is background reading A, and this is going to ask about the Ming dynasty. So please pause the video here and answer the questions that follow. So number one, it asks, what were the accomplishments of the Ming emperors? So there were many. They expanded the Silk Road, they opened canals and bridges, unified the empire, they invested in scholarship, education. However, ethnocentrism also became popular at the time, which is basically the belief that your citizens are superior to ones outside of your border. The Ming dynasty came to view Europeans as heathens, as barbarians, people who were less civilized and less developed than they were. And as a result, going along with question 3, they resort to a policy of isolationism, basically disconnecting themselves from Europe and really keeping to themselves in the actual borders of the Chinese Empire. So, just to reiterate some of these things, the Middle Kingdom, as China was known at the time, was seen by its own people to be like a beacon, a shiny city on a hill, far more sophisticated and advanced to the countries in Europe. They had gunpowder, they had more sophisticated technology, they had spices and herbs and a lot of things that were exclusive to China. It's important to note that the reason isolationism was possible for the Chinese, whereas it really was not for Europeans, is that China was a massively large country with a lot of land, a lot of natural resources to plant crops, to get animals for hunting, resources, and sustain themselves. They were not required to trade with other countries the same way that Europeans would be to get items that were exclusive to countries that were not their own. And again, these ethnocentric ideas are going to matriculate into isolationism. Basically, racism leads to China closing its borders and separating itself from the world. China becomes like a jewel for Europeans to pine after. They want access to those spices and herbs and those rare things that are only available in China. And you'll see in Chapter 3, The Dawn of Discovery, it's the goal of Europeans to find trade routes to China to get access to these things again. Just to show you, we talked a bit about the Silk Road in regard to the Middle East, or Middle Eastern men acting as middlemen and collecting profits on trade between China and Europe. These are the different networks that would make up the Silk Road. It begins very simply with one road from China all the way to Europe, and then obviously expands into a much more comprehensive network, going into India, Persia, Arabia, and then into Africa as well. So early Ming rulers were actually interested in trading with Europeans. They start sponsoring naval expeditions, voyages. Zhang Ho, the admiral of their military, starts traveling to places like India and Arabia. They bring back rare items and merchandise and things that the Chinese have never seen before, and China becomes a much more diverse place, much more open to trade. However, because of creeping in ethnocentrism, China ultimately becomes an isolationist country. Just to show you how far advanced the Chinese were to Europeans at the time, there in the background you can see Zhang Ho's ship being absolutely massive, and it dwarfs the ship used by Christopher Columbus to sail to the New World. Just to show you, these are some of the voyages of Zhang Ho. You can see him going around India, into the Middle East, and really opening up China to the Western world. It's really this taste that is going to make Europeans interested in China and basically create an obsession with getting back there and getting back access to those resources. Just as a very quick side note, the Ming are also going to construct Beijing, which is the Forbidden City. This is their capital, and it's going to remain so for hundreds of years. Several moments in history that we'll be talking about in World Civilizations will take place in the capital, so it's just important to note that it does exist, and this is what it looks like over there on the right-hand side. This is the central point of the Chinese government. It is called the Forbidden City because of its secrets and how isolated the government was from the citizens who lived outside of its walls. So we're now going to transition into the Manchus, the next ruling dynasties, which will become the kings. So if you would, please take a look at Syllabus Reading B, pause this video here, and answer the questions that follow. So just recapping these questions, the Manchus are a group that are going to move in from northern Asia, and they are going to overthrow the Ming dynasty and replace them. In terms of accomplishments, they are going to further a lot of the causes began by the Ming, expanding canals and scholarship, opportunities for education, a lot of different areas that are supposed to make people's lives better. Eventually, though, what starts to happen from Zhang Ho's voyages, from the Chinese originally mixing with the Europeans, Europe starts to compete with China. The Renaissance takes place, and Europe moves from the Middle Ages, a period of stagnation where not much is happening, to a period of innovation and discovery, where they're making money and they're making merchandise and paintings. So it creates a competition between Europe and China, and therefore this is going to threaten the Qing dynasty. You'll see that ultimately the Qing dynasty will fall due to imperialism and Europeans moving into the region during the Opium Wars and eventually conquering China. Final thing for today, this will set us up for an exploration of Asian philosophies in our next class. Please read primary sources A and B. They are about Confucianism, and answer this question. What does an ideal government and ideal man look like? Pause the video here and respond, and then we'll resume. So, just to recap this, Confucianism is all about providing opportunities to people and opportunities for social mobility. The government is supposed to be designed to provide opportunities for the people, not keep them in their social status or social place in life. Compare that to Hinduism, where there's a very clear caste system, and there's a cycle of reincarnation, where essentially living a virtuous life will then lead you to more prosperity in your next incarnation. For Confucianism, the government is supposed to provide opportunities to people. In terms of the ideal man seeks out honor in himself, living a virtuous life and respecting the different groups he comes in contact with, and therefore, as a result of that, the government is supposed to reward him for his service and his behavior. In our next lesson, we'll talk about Hinduism and Buddhism, two other philosophies and religions that are notable in Asia, and we'll be comparing them to Confucianism.